I want to discuss a topic that is quite important in organizations today. When we think about respect in a workplace, we don't always think about certain data that proves that respect is somehow compromised. A 2019 report by McKinsey found that there is a link between feeling disrespected and this employee turnover. They found that employees who reported feeling treated unfairly were twice as likely to consider leaving their jobs compared to those who felt respected. There is even, by the way, a survey that I found that back in 2021, there was the Workplace Bullying Institute that found that 75% of employed adults have personally experienced some form of workplace bullying. It's not like a small problem. It's like a big problem. And I wanted to discuss this big problem with somebody who knows about the problem. Today, my guest is Dr. Veronica Anderson. She's the author of a nice book called The Get the Respect You Deserve, 7 Secrets to Getting Heard in Your Job and in Your Relationship. Kind of related. She's an Ivy League educated eye surgeon. She's also a coach for human design relationship. She's also a physician who graduated from Princeton University. Wow, Veronica, that's like the amazing impressive CV. I'm envious.
So it's very funny because, as you know, for your guests who've done a lot of podcasts, I can always tell what the host is impressed with, but by what they talk about specifically. So you said, and audience, I want you to know that when he said Ivy League educated, and he mentioned that I went to Princeton, I know he's impressed with that. And I want you all to just calm down, because some of the most successful people that I know, and my personal coach and mentor, did not even graduate from high school and makes multi-million dollars and coaches people like me. Okay. So I want you to understand that what you told the audience about was only one part of my brain, and that brain. And Western culture and society deifies that. We think that the cognitive, the thinking, the IQ, that is God. Okay. But guess what? This is why I wrote a book about respect, because I met many people who had very high cognitive functioning, but yet they weren't getting everything they wanted in life. And so maybe we want to start out with how I've defined respect so that people can understand that. If you're, the listeners want to say, well, what is it? And that's the question that I asked. What does it mean when people say they aren't respected? And the first area that made me really think about it a whole lot was being in the physician community. And after I left doing conventional Western medicine, being in a physician community of thousands, and I would say that I'm in this group, it's like 50,000 physicians from around the world, and they all complain and try to, it's interesting because you will see that doctors are people too, and they have the same issues in their family and their life, and make bad decisions and have trouble the same way everybody else does. But they have a very high cognitive. And guess what? A lot of times that's their handicap, because my book before Get Respect was called Too Smart to Be Struggling. And the reason why I wrote that is because I saw a lot of people who were really smart and they were struggling, but they had trouble asking for help because they felt like they were so smart that they should know everything. And so they were failing in other areas of their life. I mean, and so the respect comes from realizing that people were saying, the patients don't respect me, the hospital doesn't respect me, nobody respects me. And guess what? This was before we went through the pandemic and COVID. Okay. I mean, before that, now it's even higher. They were complaining about, and I said, well, what are they really saying? What does that really mean? And just like the title of the book, they didn't feel seen, they didn't feel heard, and they didn't feel appreciated. They felt devalued by people that were around them that they were dealing with and interacting with it. And what I realized from working with my own clients, when they would say this to me, what was really going on in their life. For people on a professional level, because I was dealing with people who are really brilliant and they wanted to move forward and do the right thing and they were frustrated. And in a work situation, they were feeling like a boss wasn't seeing them right, or their colleagues weren't respecting them. They weren't getting the promotion they wanted, or they were in a high position and they didn't feel like they had a good command, and command and control is not the way you get this. They didn't feel like they had a good feel to be able to move people to the action that they wanted to be successful in their career and make their companies as successful as they wanted to be. That was on the work side. But on the relationship side, and I'm talking romance plus friends, family, okay, the same words were propping up and popping up. And I realized that these people, who are all people, are dealing with the same thing, one on a professional level and one on a personal level. They felt like they weren't seen, heard, or appreciated. And that's what people mean when I'm not getting respect. I'm not getting respect because you don't feel like your point of view is taken. And if you want to move over, and I know a lot of human resource people listen to it, and they love like data and studies and all this other type of stuff. In corporate, that's, people live and die by McKinsey. And guess what? McKinsey is biased and wrong too, and they leave out stuff and they don't know how to deal with certain stuff. But that's where boutique firms like mine come in to fill in those gaps, because we're not trying to turn a Titanic here. We want to get you results. Okay. And so respect is one of those things where this is something that is talking really about your energy. How are you landing with people? How are people landing with you? When you respect someone, what is it about them that makes you respect them? What is it about me, besides having an Ivy League degree, that makes people respect me even when they don't know that I have an Ivy League degree or who I am? What is it about me that when I walk into the room, there's something about, because I know she knows. Okay. What is that? And everybody wants that. And that's when I came up with the respect method and figured out, because I reverse engineered, think about it, I'm a doctor, but I'll tell you some other stuff. I reverse engineered. Here's how you make it so that you make people respect you. And when I say make them, it is not about force at all. It's not about force. It's about learning how to be who you are well enough so everybody is perceiving that.
Veronica, so I understand this concept of the way we feel when we feel disrespected, but what is happening in our brain when we feel disrespected? What is the psychology behind this feeling? Because the feeling is the reaction to a stimuli, a trigger that has happened externally. So, but what is happening in our brain when we don't feel disrespect?
So one of the things that we need to talk about is anatomy, but also the concept of the mind. Okay. And so I'm going to talk about these next to each other. And as I shared with you, my background is in neuroscience. So I always love this geeky brain stuff, but I'm also going to tell you something else about me, because for those of you who are a certain type of brain, I'm not going to give you enough information, and we'll talk about that. So when you talk about the mind and brain, you have what we talked about first, that cognitive, and people love that cognitive. It's been measured very well. And this is where the quote unquote IQ comes from. And in the engineering culture and society, they live and die by the cognitive brain. And it seems like a lot of times the rest of the brain is atrophied, okay, or doesn't seem to be working so well. But these people who have this cognitive brain will look at you like the deer in the headlights with everything else besides the cognitive brain, right? These are, like, so for instance, think about the people who run their life like the Elon Musk of the world, who are very focused on that cognitive. But the interesting thing about him, he's also focused on humanity and consciousness. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But let's think about cognitive. You get people who are very bright. Asperger's is the jam these days because you just function really well. Cognitive brain. Okay, next brain is the affective brain and the affective part of the mind. And that's where the personality sits. And employers love those assessments that are personality, which predict nothing really because personality changes, does. Okay. But the DISC is like one of the most popular that people love of that. Enneagrams are in the affective brain. Okay, well, that's two parts of the brain, but we also have a third part of the brain that we rarely talk about. And this is called the conative brain, and it is how you do. So think, we have a thinking brain, we have a feeling brain, there's this doing brain, which is how we naturally take action. And we all do this differently. Okay. And that's where this assessment called Kolbe comes in, Kolbe, where we test or assess people's modus operandi. And when I say test, it's not good or bad type test, it's a modus operandi. And so what happens with us is, okay, outside of us, there's an aura and energy where we are all connected, and this has been proven by physics now. So when I'm saying this, it's not so woo-woo anymore. It's been proven by physics how everything's connected to everything else. We are able to sense other people in such a way that it goes into our brain system. And guess what? There are certain people that you will find out that you are attracted to, and then you'll find out that your brain is like them. So for those out there who are in a certain way like me from a building brain standpoint, you're going to be like, she's very cool and I like her. And on the other side, there's going to be people who are like, their brain is wired differently. So it's not going to be familiar to them, because familiarity is important. And I'll tell you about that in a second. And so therefore, they're going to be like, I'm not quite sure about her. Let me get some more information. Let me listen to her a little bit more to get more data points. And just realize that when people are there listening for data points right now, there's also going to be a confirmation bias. You know about confirmation bias? The more you look for something, the more you find it. So there's going to be half of the people who are going to confirmation bias and like everything I have to say. And there's other people who are confirmation biasing, looking for where can we tick off so we can make her wrong. Okay. It's confirmation bias. It's how the algorithms on the internet work. It's why that when you search for certain things, you never see anything else to the contrary. But the internet does that because they want to keep you there and sell more stuff to you. So know the way this is put together. All right. So your brain is made in a particular way where from birth, you do things a certain way. Okay. That's the Kolbe assesses that. But let's talk about on the other side. There's this concept called imprinting. If you've never heard about it, through the first 7 years of life, you are only a subconscious mind. And the number 7, 8, 9, somewhere around there. You're only a subconscious mind, which means you're only taking in information. You are not thinking about it. Now, this has been well studied in the science field. I'm going to tell you to go look it up, because from a cognitive standpoint on what's called a quick start with a low fact finder and follow through. Now, it doesn't mean I can't do it, but I'm the visionary innovator. I'm not the data person. So even when you're listening to me talk here, you're going to have the people say, she's not giving enough details. She's not giving enough details. Who are the fact finders? That's the way your brain's working. She's not giving enough details. Go look up Kolbe, go look up what I'm talking about so that you can go down your rabbit hole. That's what fact finders do. Okay. All right. Quick starts. I'm going to be a visionary and innovator, which also makes me fascinating to listen to on a podcast like this, because I just flow into it. Okay, I'm going to tell you what else makes it interesting. So your brain is imprinted with information in your culture, your society, your parents, everything. And that is familiar to you. And you get that all the first 7 years of life. That's your subconscious going on. And so the way you think about things and you feel about things and react to certain things, a lot of times has been set up for everybody. This is not a lot of times, this is all the time. It's been set up the first 7 to 9 years of your life. And so you think you're being logical, but your subconscious brain, who's running everything, you are taking action, reacting, thinking and feeling and deciding based on where you came from and what your family thinks of and all this other type of stuff. And you may consciously try to do things opposed to that, but it's all still there. And there's a lot of research on the subconscious mind and everything like that. I'm sure that you know about what I'm saying. So think about it. Everybody has imprinting, okay? So what I talked about first on this was what we call instinct, and that's the Kolbe. So there's imprinting, there's instinct you're born with, but then there's this other piece when we talk about energy, and I call that intuition. What is that gut that people have? We all have what's called intuition, but a lot of times it's not really defined about what that is. And that's where I use the tool called human design to show people how to access this amorphous field that's out there called intuition and how to reliably tap into this. Now, one thing I want to say about that is I went from Kolbe, which is very well researched, Harvard studies, all that other type of stuff, and brain stuff, very well researched and all that other type of stuff, because this is what Western culture and society loves on the surface, on the surface. But let me just tell you, once people pull me aside after I give them the Kolbe and the brain and all the cool stuff that came from going to Princeton and going to medical school, and even like I'm trained in functional and integrative medicine and all the other type of stuff. So the natural stuff with all the academic background, what people pull aside is the intuition part of it, because they want to know how to use their gut, how to rely on it. And also we start talking about really being in the flow and going for your purpose and destiny. And this is the headache of human resources right now. Why? Because we have 3 to 4 generations in the workforce, and the younger generations are like, I'm gonna be who I am. And I'm going to have a job that is on my purpose and destiny. And so people are like, well, what does that mean? So when we start talking about things like culture, you got to have new language. Now we need to know, guess what? In the cognitive brain, you may be what's called a fact finder. I may be a quick start. Now we understand it. You're going to go get the data, but I'm going to sit here, vision and innovate. Then you're going to study. Then we're going to get the follow through to organize it. And then we're going to get the implementer to actually build it. And we're going to look for people whose brains were born that way. And this is how we create power teams. But we also have common language and understanding. So now I understand, and empathy, I understand you're a fact finder. So I'm not going to ask you to innovate. You understand that I'm a quick start. So you're not going to ask me to go for the little tiny data details, okay? Now, obviously, if I went to Princeton and I graduated from medical schools, and I will let you know that I graduated with honors from medical school, I can do the details. I can do the details, okay? But my core genius and really who I am lies someplace else. And this is why I'm on your podcast, because now I'm in my flow in my core genius, helping people with what I was born to do, let's say.
Veronica, so just to narrow down to the area of respect, I wanted to understand, and I know that you have covered that you have a specific methodology in your book, and I wanted to ask you, what should employees do in an environment where they don't feel respected? How should they react to that?
Okay, so first it's don't react. Okay, you have to first evaluate. That's the first step of the respect method starts with R, it's respect. Reflect take radical responsibility and reframe. You have to, that's the time to sit back and do an assessment, not react. Notice react is not part of the R. It's to reflect as to, okay, let's step back and figure out what's going on here. What's happening so that I'm feeling this way, and you may be feeling that way because it's being created before you were 7. You have to realize that. But I'm getting treated a certain way. Is it me or is it them? It's always you, because you notice around you that everybody's not getting disrespected. Everybody's not. Certain people are, certain people aren't. So you need to step back and figure out, what is it about me, and this gets complicated, that has led to, one, the feeling of disrespect and getting treated like that. Now, guess what? When you feel a certain way, the disrespect is in your energy, and so you're going to get more of it. We all know like attracts like. And so if you feel disrespected, that's in you. It's going to keep happening. And so the key to this, why did I say don't react? Because you have to know, and you have to embrace, this is a new way of thinking. It's not somebody else's fault. It's not somebody else's responsibility. But the reason why I do this, because it can be changed. You can change and reframe what's happening and be able to go on to create a new situation. It can be done.
Can you give me a specific situation? Like, I mean, I'm thinking on one of the extremes, like, for instance, in an organization, there will always be a manager or someone who is just an ass. He was in that way. So from my side, I may say, oh, I'm sensitive. So I feel what this disrespect in a way that is very strong compared to a person who has been trying to build their self-resilience. So how should I react? Because my case, I mean, I'm thinking about Ivan back 20 years ago when I was in corporate and so on. I was feeling like if somebody's an ass, I felt already bad, even if this person wasn't speaking. How should people react to that situation?
What's happening right now, the people who are listening to you, and obviously you, have become more aware. So the first thing is to be aware of what's happening. And the awareness comes in that somehow there's different levels of this. Somehow I've created this. Now, how did you create it? Because you got in a situation where there was somebody like that. And why did that happen? Okay, now that doesn't mean that that person isn't the way they are, but realize that person being the way they are is not about you. It's about who they are. It's not about you, right? So that's why when I say stop and reflect, reacting gets you the opposite of what you want to get. But this is what we've been taught. Go out there and fight. Go fight. Except if we see what's going on around the world, you'll realize that the more you fight, the more you get fighting. That's not how you change this. You have to step back and almost do the opposite of it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to get beat up, but you have to step back in such a way that you're not engaging in the same thing that you're already getting, because that's just going to create more of it. It's resistance. And you know, if you start a fight with anybody, or as that person starts fighting with you and fight back, it's not going to stop until somebody beats somebody up and somebody does the mea culpa, like, gotta stop. But if you come at somebody or somebody comes at you and you don't react, the whole thing's going to diffuse. It will, if you don't do anything. It's now, there are times where things come to physical blows in job places. I'm sure you've heard about those. Okay.
It becomes more rare these last days, like there is a physical confrontation, but it may. Yeah.
I have a colleague that, you know, she's dealing with that in a company right now where there was a physical altercation because of this levels of disrespect between two people. But always it takes, you know, they say it takes two to tango, it takes two to fight. So what I'm saying is you have to learn how calm yourself to the point where it's almost you put up that barrier. Now, this takes practice. It takes somebody to teach you how to do it because you haven't been taught this. This is not what we've been taught. So you're saying if somebody's coming at me, if you've been taught to do it a different way, think about it. You were imprinted with doing it a different way. It's going to be challenging for you to even think that there's another way to do it. That's where people who deal with things like culture or things like mindset and all this is what I deal with. I help people change their mindset so they get the result that they want ultimately. The respect is about getting what you want. It's about all of us getting what you want. Now, sometimes you may have to remove yourself from that particular job and position. Why? Because you're in a place where that's been allowed by the culture of the workplace. You're not going to have a jerk in a workplace unless it's allowed. You go places where it's not allowed. Think about I don't know what your parents ran, kind of home your parents ran, but in a lot of homes, there's just certain things that you don't do. It doesn't happen because it's not allowed. And I'm talking keeping people operating in a certain level of order. Same thing in workplaces. So if you have somebody who's running crazy in work and being a bully, it's because bullying is allowed. Now, why is that? This is when you have to get people who are culturing to come in and observe everything that's going on. You may have somebody at the top who's been taught to shrink away and just like sees it, but doesn't intervene in it or doesn't make it clear that that's your area of expertise. Okay. But when you're in the situation, you have to figure out, how am I going to shift this? How am I going to step out of it? And that's where the reflect comes in. And I'm just telling you, this isn't easy. It isn't easy. If it were, there wouldn't be people like me and you to help you do it. It is not easy. It's something that we all have to learn because learning how to change something that's been wired into you. And that takes what's called constant space repetition. You have to do it over and over again, but you don't even know what to do because it's not part of your skill set. It's not part of your world. And so when I'm saying this, people are like, that's impossible. It's because nobody has told you how to look at a different possibility. Okay, so if you keep looking at the bully, you're only gonna see bullies. If you keep looking at being disrespected, you're only gonna see disrespect. But guess what? If you move your head a little bit, all of a sudden, that's not as clear over there. If you look completely on the other side, all of a sudden, you're looking at respect over here. You don't even see the bully because you've blocked that out. Doesn't mean the bully's not still there. It's just not part of what you are giving attention to. And you learn how to change your energy so the bully doesn't give attention to you either. So there'll be people around who are bullies, and you anybody who's in the workplace with a bully, go look around and you will see some people in there, and they're not necessarily loud or obnoxious or anything else, and they won't be getting bullied. Now start studying that person and figuring out if what I'm saying is the case. Now you really have to, this is when the investigator, the data, the fact finder starts looking at what is it about them that makes them not be bullied. And they're not walking around and they're meek or anything like that. It's just the bully seems to ignore that person and know that they can't get to that person. What is that? And this is the type of stuff that you have to learn. This is the type of stuff that, makes somebody soar and other people shrink and fall off because they can't take it.
Veronica, you mentioned an interesting fact that I completely agree with you. Sometimes this disrespect comes from the systemic toxicity in the culture of the organization, and somehow the management of an organization are kind of the guardians in order that the culture doesn't go to hell, or maybe that they start noticing that it has gone to hell already a long time ago. Is there a way that people's managers can practice ways to detect when they are missing the signals of this of respect? Because, I mean, these managers might be that they claim that they're busy, so they don't pay attention to that. But is there a way to always keep alert to changes that can affect the level of respect in an organization?
The reason I'm explaining about 3 parts of the brain and things like energy and like, because a lot of times what has happened is because people are performing well from a skill standpoint and now I've seen places where people are completely incompetent. Let me just not. I've, I've seen it, it's scary. I've seen it in medicine, it's scary. We all know sometimes where that kind of thing happens, but let's assume that's not the case, okay? You have to realize the skills and the cognitive have become paramount and profits over people. Now, people are starting to realize that if we tend to people, we'll get more profits. People are starting to turn around that there are different ways to get to the same thing of a well-performing company with high profits without walking over people. You do not have to disrespect people to be able to do that, okay? So it is important to realize that to notice it, once you start noticing it, you have to document what it is, right? You have to notice, well, what does that, and that's why we defined respect. What is it that you're noticing? Why? Because in order to get the opposite of that, the respect, you have to notice you've been seeing the other side of that, the disrespect. So then you have to really define what it is, so then you can define what the opposite is for you. So you have to study it for a minute. And why I say for a minute, you don't study this forever. This is why therapy can fall down, because people study their problems over and over and over again, and that grooves it into your brain. That's what happens with neuroscience. You groove things into your brain and it becomes a habit. And so their problem becomes a habit because they talk about it over and over and over again. You have to take your attention off of that. So, but you have to get clear on what you want. But the way we get clear on what we want is through the duality. We know down because we know up. We know black because we know white. There's a duality. So the reason the reflect is really about saying, what is it that's really here and how did I get here? But what is it? Once you decide what you have and it's on the negative side, then you can define clearly what looks for you, and then you can start practicing it. Okay, now, you've been wired to react. So the part of this that has to really come into is learning how to mitigate your own stress response, to become aware enough that you can calm yourself and bring it back in the moment. Because when you're under stress, everybody knows you don't think well under stress. It's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. That's what happens on the outside. But what's driving that is all this stuff that's going on the inside, and that includes all kinds of hormones and everything. This is why when I work with people, I bring in the physical piece, because without learning how to control the physiology that's going on in your body, and there's all kinds of ways to be able to do that with meditation and calming, and I'm a hypnotherapist, and also eating certain ways and certain supplements and things like that. There's a whole holistic 360 way to deal with what is going on. And so you need to make yourself strong in a way, but that means that you have to take your attention off of what you are getting now, which is the disrespect, and what do I do to get over there? And you have to start looking and studying that. So first, realize, reflect, there's seven letters, they all are a different thing. The reflect is 1/7 of it. It's the first 7th of it. After reflect, and you're going to reframe it. So realize what I told you to do. Figure out what it is. Now reframe it, and reframe it is figure out what's good about it, because for everything, there's something good and bad. What was good about that happening? Oh, now you're more aware. And it made you listen to this podcast because you wanted to try to figure, is there a way out of this, right? Okay. So the good thing about that is, oh, crap, I realized that's been happening there. Oh, crap, I realized that grandma so-and-so acted like that, and I was raised by grandma so-and-so, and that's why this all happened. You know what I'm saying? Because that's imprinting, what I'm talking about. You'll see these patterns recreate throughout your life. And this is why I wrote a book about jobs and relationships, because we're a whole person. We create this in our whole kinds of atmosphere. There's no accident that some people have the same romantic relationship over and over again. It keeps breaking. That was imprinted into them. They feel comfortable with it. It's familiar. Some people are familiar with disrespect. It's comfortable for them. So what do? They actually do things that create more of it because their subconscious mind is telling them that's the comfort zone, right? So this is why I say take responsibility, because you need to understand that it is you. But I'm telling you it's you, not because you're a bad person, because this is how the subconscious mind works. It wants to keep us safe. And safe is whatever feels familiar. So respect may not feel familiar to you. And so you keep walking into positions that are unfamiliar as far as that respect, because you know what it is and you know how to deal with it. You see how I'm doing like this and shaking my head? I mean, I'm from a culture that knows how to do like this and shake their head. Right? I mean, you talk about your Latin background, right? There are certain things that the culture teaches, and we laugh at a lot of them because it's funny and it's like those people do this. But why do we even say those people do this? Because it's about being familiar with what we know. So me on the outside, I'm going to look at a Latin culture and I'll be like, he is so Latin, right? And I'm going to look for something that's familiar about it, whether that be something positive. I could the same way look for, oh, he's one of those. Like here we are in America. Oh, he's one of those. He must have ran across the border, right? We can go either way on that, right? But why do we do that? It goes all the way back to the imprinting, where mom and dad and culture and society, where we were, made us unconsciously believe what was right and wrong. And we live our life by those rules, even when we don't think we are.
Veronica, you mentioned something that is quite important, and I think is important to reiterate. You mentioned that, yeah, we need to pause before our reaction. But it's not as easy like you said it, and it's going to be possible as me as a human being to control my emotions if I have never practiced. But you have also mentioned a bunch of practices that can help us train ourselves to give this time to train ourselves to control, in fact, our reaction. So we have a trigger, and then we have just a couple of seconds where we can have a choice on how to react. But that needs practice, whatever it is. You mentioned meditation, that you mentioned other type of practice. So this is important because in many organizations, they think that if I give you a training about respect,
let's talk about training.
Yeah, exactly. If I give you a training about respect, you are going to be trained. It's a little bit like this bullshit about bias, managing biases, that if I show you how we should be reacting towards a Latino, then you are going to learn how to do it. No, we don't learn by the example. We learn by continuous practice, by catching this moment of emotional thinking into this rational thinking, and we have in the middle kind of a choice that we can decide to be angry, to be happy, to be whatever we want.
Yeah. So what happens with training and organizations is they host these trainings, and then they all feel good that they feel like they check the box, because a lot of times, let's just admit it, people want to get that off their list because that's not part of why they're in business, right? So I just want to fix this problem, right? It's just like we went through a really tough time in the world. Over here in America, when the pandemic was happening, we were having all kinds of unrest and the elections and with things that were happening, which seeped out around the world. We talk about bias and things like that. Everybody just wants to check the box and just be like, oh, we put in a program, check, we've done it. And who feels good? The learning and development feels like I got that off my list, but they also feel like they really did something. Okay. So let's explain the issue with this. You have to go from knowing something to actually being it. And so a training gives you knowledge. That is it. It doesn't tell you how to do it or give you the practice to do it. And it certainly doesn't make you be it where it's part of your essence. Now, let me give you a good example. If I went to school and I read the books about how to be an eye surgeon, my first career was as an ophthalmologist and an eye surgeon. If I read the books and went through a classroom training, would you feel comfortable with me operating on your eyes? I could recite every word in that book. Every word in the book I could recite. I can tell you how to do eye surgery. Would you be comfortable? Would you be comfortable with the pilot flying your plane who read the book and could tell you everything in the book? No, because you understand that the knowledge of something, the cognitive ability to understand something doesn't mean you could do it or that it's part of you and you're being it. And I think, that's the explanation. So you have to go from knowing to doing to being. But part of being also is, even when you're learning it, that you're being what it is, that you are really saying, okay, I'm learning this, but I'm going to really steep myself into being the surgeon, right? So, I mean, you're dreaming about it, everything. When you are doing this, I'm telling you how doctor training works. And this is how, when I'm working with people and I'm calling it a training, it works like doctor training. And what does doctor training works like? Well, they make us study it. They make sure we got it cognitively. Then we start watching people do it and then doing it little by little with oversight and feedback. Keep doing it and come back. Constant spaced repetition with people who are training us, who know what we're doing, who said, no, not like that, like this. And we come back, we talk about it. And then after guess what? As a doctor, I have to get continuing medical education. It's not that I just did it and that's it forever. So this is the problem with current corporate trainings a lot of time. You come in, you host something, it's beautiful, everybody feels good, kumbaya, and stops right there. What you really need to do is you do part of the training, and then you put people together in cohorts where they can work together and they can have feedback. And then the coach and the teacher comes in, sees what's going on, helps correct things. You go back, do it some more. And it happens over a period of time. And this is how you go from knowing something to actually doing it and being it. And so that culture and people actually do change. So anything that you learned how to do, from driving a car to walking, everything you learned how to do, most of it, now think about it, you learned how to walk and talk, and it wasn't because you read a book. Exactly. You don't need to read a book. You learn to walk and talk because you looked at it, you watched people doing it, then you tried it. You watched some more, and guess what? You learned how to do it. Think about tying your shoes. Wasn't that so complex when you were little? And now you can do it and talk to somebody else and not even, and it's just like, I don't remember tying my shoes, but it's tied. Same with driving. When you first learned how to drive, you might even went to simulation. Then you got behind the wheel and oh boy, was it scary. But now you drive down the road every day and guess what? Everybody's not having crashes all over the place. Even people who are doing what they shouldn't be doing and typing on their cell phone, they still are not having an accident. Now it's dangerous to do that. Don't do that. One of the highest things that causes accidents, but people do that all the time because it's really become part of them. So we need to understand about trainings is you have to bring companies in. And this is why like people are living and dying with management consulting firms and nobody in there has done any of this stuff ever. They just produced papers. And so you can come in and theoretically tell me what to do, but would you let somebody McKinsey be your eye surgeon?
Definitely not, Veronica.
Now, they may have an ophthalmologist on staff, and you'll be like, they have an ophthalmologist on staff now that went from, they could be a person like me. They went from eye surgery to doing, consulting, teaching, and training. They could have somebody like that, and you would let them do your eye surgery. But guess what? Right now, from a moral and ethical standpoint, I would not do your eye surgery. Now, guess what? I could probably still do it because these things in doctorhood are to a certain extent like riding a bicycle, but I wouldn't do your eye surgery from a moral and ethical standpoint because I haven't done it in a long enough time. Although I can still see the steps and everything. I could see what it looked and think about it. I learned to do something where I was looking through a microscope and operating independently with both hands and both feet, doing all different things all at the same time. This is what eye surgeons do. And I went from not being able to squirt water on the eye to keep it wet to being able to listen to music and talk to the patient and keep them calm and run the operating room. I was the CEO of the operating room every time I walked in. There was no bull in the operating room when we're there. The reason why you want a surgeon to teach you how to do something is because they know how to command respect, because they've done it when they walked in the operating room. It is a requirement. So we learn, how do you get respect? Why? Because it's taught to us.
Let me recap recap a little bit of our conversation. So the main topic is about respect in the workplace. You have mentioned some certain steps that could be followed. That this is something that where you have people can find more details in your book, The Respect You Deserve, 7 Secrets to Getting Heard in Your Job and in Your Relationship. So there is a little bit more of details on how to do it. We have discussed also about that in many cases, the work that needs to be done, so either there is the toxic environment comes from the systemic work culture that has been done, and that is about you, how you are going to be reacting and how are you going to be perceiving or reframing the situation so that it doesn't affect you. We have been also kind of bitching a little bit about the system of teaching. So if we want an organization that is respectful, you cannot go and say, example A, yes or no. That is not how people learn. We need to change behaviors. In order to change behavior, it needs to be little by little, practice, feedback. So it cannot be done in 1 or 2 hours awareness session, because as you said, it's not about knowledge, because you said it. I wouldn't trust you to do an operation eye if you have been only reading a book, right? So that's where the conversation is going. And I wanted to dig a little bit more about the spectrum of respect. So let's go from the toxic side of toxic culture to the opposite. Are there situations where too much respect prevents businesses or leaders to be candid at work because it's too much? It's a little bit, okay, I have to be too mindful about you. I shouldn't be mentioning that Ivan is a Latino because he might be hurt. Or I should forget about, I should be not asking him about his gender. Is it a moment where we are going too much into respect, and that can prevent like the fluidity and genuinity of relationships and can prevent to be candid at work?
You're hitting one of everybody likes to use this point trigger, right? You're hitting one of my triggers. Why is it a trigger for me? What you're talking about being quote unquote too much respect, because we've gone away where we're not seeing people and hearing people for who they authentically are. And who you authentically are is not something that's surface, which is why I introduce tools like Kolbe and Human Design, so we can see people from a different way and have a different level of conversation, which is not about these superficial hot point type things. That is not to say that they're not institutional biases. We all need to admit, because we're all people and human and we've been imprinted, that there are going to be biases in the system. We're never going to get rid of all of it. And how you correct biases is not going to be through a training over 1 day or 1 week or whatever you decide you want to do, a half day, 90 minutes. That's not going to correct this. What's going to correct the circumstances is really for us to start understanding each other on a different level. And so when you say, have we gone too far? Yes. Yes. The reason you're listening to me here right now is not because I'm a woman or not because I'm Black. It's because I know what I'm talking about and doing. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing at all. Now, have there been circumstances where people who look like me or have my gender have not been seen and heard because the system has desired to allow people who look different, the opposite, let's say, to bring in their buddies? Or bring in people who they're comfortable with because that's how they were imprinted, because that's their whole lives. Do you see how we get to this level of forgiveness? Do you see how when I'm looking at somebody and they are the opposite of me, a white man, I'm not going to be mad at them. And I don't want them to be saying, well, I was born a racist. Stop it. Okay. You weren't. Okay. This was put on you by a culture and society, and none of us can help how we were born and where we were born and what we look like. So we need to change the language. And so when you're figuring out how do we bring in the right people, if you want to make your boardroom different, if you want to make your C-suite different, you're going to have to go outside of people who went a traditional route even, because you're going to find people, like I told you, my best coach right now never graduated from high school, and every day I'm on a call with about 50 of us are on a call with him every morning, and people do it for years because we're getting such knowledge. And why do I do that? I do that because it's part of my purpose and destiny to be able to help people. And so therefore I have to keep rising up so I can see what's going on well enough, and then have the light come on and say, okay, let me help this person fix it. So when I'm walking in, I'm not mad at you if you're wearing a KKK hood. I'm not mad at you. Okay. It might be a little bit concerning, but I'm going to be like, I want to hear what your view is and what you have to say. And I want you to talk to me. And but here's the thing. On this podcast, so people find it really funny when they meet me and they do discovery sessions and strategy sessions, because I'm talking a lot now, but I act like a doctor when I get in with you. I ask you a question and then I let you go. Why? Because my diagnostic mind is going, how am I going to best offer this person, this group, what they need to be able to get the result that they want? So I'm here on the podcast talking to you so you can understand. You read the book. I want you to read the book, but in the beginning of the book, I say, the reason I'm telling you to read this book is because I want you to hire me or somebody like me, because I know you are not going to make a change from reading a book. And so if you don't do anything else, put down the book and go find who you're going to hire, then pick back up the book, right? Because we learn through repetition. And if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not getting the result you want, it means you don't know what you're doing. You need somebody else who's going to show you how to do it.
That's true. Veronica, this has been a very interesting discussion. One, because I don't know, your passion. That's something that really I wasn't expecting. So let me tell you my bias from the beginning. As you mentioned,
tell me your bias.
Princeton degree, that an authentic intellectual. So she's going to teach me something from the book. Then I discovered that you hate that tag. Okay, that's fine. That's
no, I don't hate it. I love it because it opens doors, because people are so biased towards it. And it meant that I have a good cognitive brain that people like, yes, but that's not the make or break. It's not the make or break.
You are totally right. And I love the story about your coach, because despite the fact that because of my upbringing, I believe, yeah, good universities, that looks like awesome. It makes me all chill and all the stuff. No, I do believe that wisdom cannot be acquired from university degrees.
Wisdom.
Exact. Right. Exactly. So I love this discussion. I have learned a lot. And I think a lot of people may want to contact you to gather some wisdom too. And how can they reach you out, Veronica?
So drveronica.com. And let me just tell something else about having wisdom. Everybody is not the ideal person to work with me. So when you think you're interviewing me, I'm interviewing you, because I'm only going to work with people I know I can help and are coachable and are not just trying to check a box. Now, here's the thing. If I don't think you're the right person or organization, that's why I have all the colleagues. This is why I network, because I'm going to find the right person for you, right? drveronica.com. Ask me. I have a vast network. The other thing that I do is I have virtual conversations and executive forums where I get together leaders in HR, C-suite leaders, to talk about hot topics of the day. So if you're somebody who is a HR leader, listen, or other type of leader, please contact me, because what'll happen is you'll be in the room with other leaders and we'll be able to talk about leading with emotional intelligence, hiring the right talent, how to be resilient, how to manage remote teams. We do topics, I do trainings like that, but as you know, they're a little bit more than trainings. They're not just, we start out with the 90 minutes, but then it's a blown out thing because it takes time. We have to get you turned around, but we have information where you can come and talk with other people, and then you get to know me and the other people.
That's good, Veronica. So I will put the website, drveronica.com. I will also put your LinkedIn profile. And I guess in your website, I can find more information about the executive forums that you are organizing, right?
What happens, connect with me, because we do these, we keep them they're invite only. But if you connect with me and you're the right person, we're going to have you in there. We want to keep our room tight and comfortable with the right value offered, so that people enjoy participating in and coming. So this is not where people sit on the sidelines and just say, let me see what's going on. We have the right people in the room, so that besides you learning something from me, it's a conversation and we can learn from each other. And that's how these virtual conversations are put together. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to me, Veronica, drveronica.com, and we'll talk about, and as I said, if it turns out you're not right for this particular platform, I have a lot of colleagues who there will be some place where you are right for it. I can put you where you're going to be. That's the idea. So you can flourish wherever you are.
Yep. Thank you very much, Veronica, for spending time with me today and to spending time with our audience. And thank you also for breaking a little bit my natural biases.
I really appreciate you having me on, and I hope that your audience learns a lot from this conversation. And I'm a real person. And, I work with a team of people behind me. So I'm the face of the organization, but there's a lot of people who get it together like any organization. So our boutique firm can absolutely help you. And if we can't, we know a lot of other boutique firms that can help you get a result.
Great. Thank you, Veronica. Have an excellent day ahead.
Thank you so much.